An enhancement to the GTX file format and interoperability between SOLIDWORKS and ASAP now allows users to assign object names and layers in SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to take you through a demonstration performing this layering process. We're looking at a projector assembly, which consists of lens housing that you see in this brushed gray color, and there's 3 pieces to that. Inside this assembly you also have glass, and that you see in green, so there are 9 elements. And we also have rings that hold this glass in place, and there's an aperture inside this lens assembly as well. If you take a section view, we can look at the different elements inside and see some of these parts. What we want to do in the end is be able to use ASAP with optics assigned to all these different pieces. Alright, so how do we do that? Well, we need to look at solid bodies and surfaces within SOLIDWORKS, so let's expand those trees. So we'll start with the aperture. We see it highlighted there inside the picture. If we right-click on the name, and we go to GTX layer, we click there, and we can assign the layer to the aperture. So I'm going to put aperture here and say OK. I'm going to do the same thing with the lenses, only I'm going to put them on a glass layer, and I can select multiple pieces by holding the Shift key and selecting all those 9 lenses. Right click, GTX layer, and I'm going to put glass on there. Say OK. And I continue this process of layering by selecting pieces with similar optical properties. Here's the housing. So right click, GTX layer. And I'm going to put a housing layer on there. OK. Do my rings. Right click, GTX layer, and put a ring layer on. And say OK. And now I'm going to save that. But the real file I'm interested in is the GTX file. So I'm going to file save as now. Let's find my GTX, ASAP GTX. And it's going to retain that name projector assembly 4. Say save. It's creating that file. Okay, now I'm done with SOLIDWORKS. So I'm going to go over to ASAP now. And I need to open that GTX file I just made. So I go to Open, and I select Look for GTX files. Here we are, CAD files. There's that file I just created. And I open that, and I get this dialog that asks me for setup parameters. The defaults normally work fine. I'll click OK. My import is happening. Okay, so here is the naming structure that is retained from SOLIDWORKS. And we see we've got the aperture, we've got the glass and the different lenses. Here's our housing pieces and our 10 rings. So all our SOLIDWORKS part names are retained. And over here is where I can assign optical properties to these different layers. So here, if I right click, I can modify and put different coatings on different layers. So here I've got an absorb coating on my aperture because I don't want any light transmitting through it. I've got interface of air on each side. So I hit OK. And I do the same thing with the other layers. So here I've got a bare coating on for Fresnel reflections. Here's glass interface, glass air interface. I've given it a color of light blue. So I can go on down the line and assign these different properties to the different layers. And notice how they're retained as well for the expanded tree. So I don't have to do it for each piece. Okay, so when I'm happy with that, I just hit return. And ASAP creates an INR file for me of all that geometry. So I can either confirm that geometry by doing a view facets command, or I can create a main file to call this geometry and read it, and then do other ASAP commands associated with tracing rays and any kind of analysis I want to do. So I've done this beforehand, and here is a basic setup for my main file. I called this main projector assembly 4. And this is where I call the INR that was just created, the geometry, read this projector for assembly. I've created a source further down the line, and then some plotting and tracing. So if I run this and plot it and view it in the 3D viewer, this is what I get. Here's our 3D view of the assembly. I can expand my naming tree, and here's all my names again. So I've got different parts of the aperture, and I can look at the rays that I've traced through the system. They're doing various things. If I look at a wireframe, I can see those rays going through the system a little better. So basically, we can do anything in SOLIDWORKS and export it into a format that ASAP can use to do ray tracing.